Hello everyone, welcome to Bruichladdich Distillery, the laddie shop at Bruichladdich Distillery. If you can't hear me because of the wind outside, you'll know that we are suffering intense Jamaican style storms at the moment on Isla. The power has been out in the setup, so the audio tests were interrupted by a power outage. If the power goes off again, we'll disappear and you'll know the power's off. We'll try to get it back on if we can. We've got a hamster and a wheel over in the corner there, and we'll try to get this going again. We've not done this sort of thing for a while. We're out of practice a wee bit. We used to talk to you quite a lot live from the distillery, and it's great to be able to do it again tonight and frame that in the world of Octomore as well, which is obviously very important to us. I'm joined here tonight by former painter and decorator Alan Logan and former tour guide Adam Hannett. Two men, despite their past job titles, who know more about Octomore probably than anyone else at the distillery here. So of course Alan's our production director who oversees essentially the production site itself and the company, and Adam, obviously I keep going to say head distiller, but you're not head distiller anymore.
You call me anything you like, Rob.
Adam is recently, quite rightly, promoted to master blender. So for me, Octomore's been a journey. It's something that started many years ago, and it's something that was very new and fresh at the time. And it's interesting to sit with two guys like Adam and Alan who have come through such incredible journeys with the business alongside that of Octomore. So it'll be cool to get some time with them tonight and learn a little bit more about it. One final apology before we take on the next or move on to the next sort of steps. Katie Smith, the Octomore brand manager, senior brand manager, is behind the camera here. She demanded that we didn't wear gilets tonight or matching gilets tonight. Adam and I missed the memo and we've come wearing gilets. So the last row we got before we went live just there was Katie going through us for wearing gilets. So
still ringing in the ears, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. She's actually still just giving us daggers. She's not even laughing. So we're here to talk about Octomore. The 16s, the Series 16 just recently culminated in the release of the 16.4. We are lucky enough to have some in front of us tonight. I hope many of you do. Some of you may not, some of you may get some soon. But if you do have it, please open a bottle and taste along with us as we get to that stage. Some of you, or most of you who've tuned in with us tonight, will know a lot about Octomore, and it'll be a big part of your whiskey drinking life. But I thought it would be good for those who maybe don't, for the guys to give us a wee bit of a background on what Octomore is and where it came from and what it's really all about. So, Alan, you've been with the business since 2001.
Yep.
So long before we started making Octomore. So it'd be great to hear from your point of view, like what's it all about, where did it come from, and where's it going?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Octomore was conceived in 2002, and the idea just came round by, it was a bit of a what if moment. And Jim was having a meeting with the maltsters, Baird's Malt, who we were supplying our malt. We were buying, so in 2001 when we reopened the distillery, we started making Bruichladdich and Port Charlotte. So Bruichladdich being the unpeated version of our whisky that was made before the distillery closed, and it was quite interesting because Bruichladdich originally, before it closed, it was like 4 ppm. And then when we started looking at opening a distillery, Jim was thinking, well, we go 4 or 10, and we tried 10 for a while, but then actually we reverted back to 0 ppm quite quickly. And with Port Charlotte, trying to make a heavily peated Isla single malt, with in Bruichladdich that hadn't been done, but there was always this kind of debate about whether Port Charlotte was made, well, not Port Charlotte, but a heavily peated whisky was made at the distillery before, because obviously when they used to malt the barley here, back before the 1960s, this building was the malt stores, the malt floors. So they malted it here and they kilned it here, and we know there's history of the distillery having peat banks and stuff. So there was always this kind of debate, was Bruichladdich once upon a time a heavily peated whisky or not? So the idea of making Port Charlotte was obviously to try and recreate that style of whisky. So then you fast forward, Jim was having a meeting with the maltsters, and he was just learning a bit about the process of how they make Port Charlotte peated malt, and at Baird's they were making super concentrated malt, and then blending that with plain malt to try and then make 40 ppm. So it got Jim quite curious about, the super concentrated. Has anybody ever distilled it? And they says no, it's it's really high phenols, and that then led to Jim saying, well, I want to try it. Could we buy some? And they were quite
Not like Jim at all.
no, just very impulsive. So yeah, very impulsive. So I mean, it got Jim really excited. I think he then told everybody he was getting this very unique one-off type of malt. He created, I remember I was at the distillery at the time, I was mashing and distilling. I remember the day well when the first truck arrived with Octomore, Jim, in true Jim style. He got a piper, James Brown was piping, James was in his kilt, the truck was piped into the yard, we were all out, watched this truck come in, and it was a big thing because it was the first time that it had ever been done. And at the distillery, Jim made it a big occasion, so the malt came in, and then obviously we started milling it, mashing it, and instantly there was a completely different aroma around the distillery because our open top mash tun, you could smell the smoke, pretty much out in the yard. It was just, we were used to Port Charlotte, but this went up, a level. I remember mashing at the time and even going home and my mother saying, like, what's that smell? Like it was off your clothes because it really stuck to your clothes. So, yeah. And then, when it came to the distillation, it was myself and Neil McTaggart was on. Neil McTaggart was an old stillman, and Jim was there with us. So when we started doing the first run, I remember Jim and Duncan being in the still house, and Jim was, he was a bit apprehensive about it because, the phenol levels were so high in Octomore. It was just like, and we nicknamed it the Beast. It was like, that time it was like, it was really, really smoky. And actually when it came to it, distilling it, Jim was, at first he was really nervous because it was all about the peat. Like when you came through the stills, it was really, really smoky, really, and he was just wrestling with it. But it was something that through time, Jim had this vision. He kept on going back and he said, no, we'll need to take a longer cut and changing it. And it was really, really smoky, and it just wasn't, he wasn't getting it. So the first one went through, and then he came back in the next day and we tried again. And then actually there was more emphasis on trying to, Jim, at first we were struggling, what's he not happy with? Because it was really smoky, and we thought that was what he was trying to achieve. But actually what he was trying to do was get kind of Octomore to be kind of more three-dimensional. We wanted the phenols to be there, but he wanted to have that power of Octomore, but also a bit of elegance and sweetness. So that kind of triangle, it was three-dimensional. And again, we're just tweaking slow distillation, just taking our time, trying to get that purity of the distillation, like slowing it down to get that style of whiskey coming through. It took time, but actually when we got it, because we run quite a long foreshot here at Bruichladdich, it's we distill slowly and with a long foreshot. We're sacrificing some of the phenols at the beginning, so I was learning quite a lot with them because I was only 22 at the time when I was learning. But actually, what Jim was trying to do was push some of the higher phenols over the top. Sacrifice some of the higher phenols in the foreshot to get to a lower point in the distillation to get that balance, so that he was bringing more of the lighter alcohol through to get that sweetness and elegance. So taking a slightly later cut gave us that kind of style. So when we cracked it, it was then, from there it was just like, we knew we created something unique because you had something that was powerful in spirit, and this was before it even went into barrel. Yeah. But they had that sweetness and elegance there that just gave that balance.
It's a really important point, I think. Sorry to jump in, because when you take somebody that's, particularly someone that's new to Octomore, and you say, it's the most heavily peated whisky series in the world, try that. There's a lot of smoke on the nose. Obviously, that's going to be the first thing they get it. Yeah. But everyone that tastes it expecting it to be this bomb of smoke, and it's so much more than that. And and actually that's the first time I've heard that in detail. And I'm charged with education of the business, but to hear that in that detail is really interesting. And obviously that's given it such a foundation to be where it is.
That was it. It was kind of set, and then it tied into what we were trying to do. Now it seems crazy because, like, again, we were celebrating like how it was heaviest peated whiskey in the world. But what Jim was trying to do was tame it down because it was a spirit. Because I can remember, like, and even if you, when we're running Octomore, if you take a sample 10 minutes into the run, you know, it's really, really smoky. There's like, you know, but there's no balance to it. And actually, as distillers, we want to try and get that balance, and that creates the platform. The viscosity is very important as well, like getting that oily texture, because that's what's carrying the flavour, the phenolic flavour through and into the cask. So again, just having that kind of balance in it gave it that three-dimensional approach. And like you were saying, we always, you know, over the years, and when we obviously matured it, and then the first release of Octomore was a 5-year-old. And again, there was, you know, huge excitement because this was bringing Octomore to the world and letting people try it. And actually, it was that, you know, Jim was always referring to it as it's a discovery whiskey. It's like no other. Like, there's a whiskey out there that, you know, everybody, some people have had bad experience with smoky whiskies. You know, they've been introduced to whiskies that are really strong and it's put them off them. But actually, Octomore is in a different kind of category where it's that discovery because it's smoky, it's got a bit of power, it's like high in alcohol strength, but actually there's balance there, and it's actually not as, you know, it's like the beast has been tamed down. But yeah,
and that's a really interesting way of looking at it. That's because even people that are the biggest people that are into Octomore talk about it's, you know, they talk about the peat and they talk about how strong and powerful it is. So it's interesting. And you talked about Jim going to the maltsters and. You know, this super concentrated high phenol barley. So the process behind that effectively is that the maltsters are peat smoking the barley effectively as hard and as long as they can within the limits.
It's a longer. So it's a bit like, you know, not so much cold smoking, but they try and balance the temperature because in the malting process, when you get to beyond germination and you try to when you dry, like you can. Burn peat for so long, and then you could increase the temperature and it dries quicker. So if you want to make it an efficient batch of malt, then you could add heat and dry it out quicker. Whereas with what they do is actually dry it at lower temperature for longer to allow more intense smoke, and they get higher batches of phenols, and then that allows them then to have a concentrated batch that they can mix with plain, like unpeated malt that they can get it. So yeah, it's quite interesting. Obviously, it's more uneconomical to make a batch, but you know, it's unique, and yeah, I mean, it's
an example of the opportunity to play with quality of spirit and balance that with the commercial side. So it's pretty expensive to make, but it's.
What's interesting about that is that every batch they make is different.
Yeah,
you can't control. With the peat,
there's not a target that you're trying to.
No, again, they're getting as much in as they can, but we always talk about if it's a windy day up in Inverness and you get more draw, then there will be more heat, therefore it will dry faster and absorb less smoke.
Yeah, that's
so that batch being different every time, I think, is one of the really important cornerstones.
I should have probably mentioned at the start that for those of you who are tuning in, I'll probably know that we'd put a wee note out to see if anyone had any questions to send them in beforehand, and we'll maybe try and field some as we go as well. We've got some of the guys checking some comments as we go, but Andre had asked about how Octomore achieves the level of phenol in parts per million. So Andre, I hope that answers your question. Adam, you've been very quiet in between us here.
I'm just enjoying the stories. I didn't realise that first batch was piped in by
James Brown. James Brown, the godfather of soil.
Also obviously the association with Octomore came from the lost distillery at Octomore Farm, which
James now owns.
And we have a strong partnership with James right from 2001. You know, he supplies us with spring water, and coincidentally, we don't put any Octomore water in the Octomore whiskey. So you know,
so it's one of the only ones that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
So Adam, you joined the business in 2004. I jokingly mentioned as a tour guide, but I think when you joined, you did a wee bit of everything at the time.
I think you're right. So I joined as a tour guide initially. Which is great, and not knowing anything about the whisky industry, you know, growing up in Islay, you just assume that there's distilleries everywhere, and you know, that's fine. You don't take much to do with them. So for me, learning about whisky was incredible. But I think particularly about Bruichladdich and what what was happening, and you know, the first day I sat down with Jim, and he kind of explained like what's happened at Bruichladdich, what we were doing. You know, it wasn't just about making whiskey; it was the project, the people, you know, building the bottling hall, doing all these kind of things. So by 10 o'clock on my first morning, I was in love with whiskey.
Well,
this is the thing for me. So,
so where did the journey with Octomore start? After you're kind of joining the business?
Yeah, so I joined as a tour guide, and then again, the great thing about Bruichladdich, particularly in those early days, is lots of opportunities. So lots of things to do. You know, for example, Duncan, I remember saying one day, right, we're going to go to 3 shifts, so we're going to work 24 hours a day. We need someone to train as a mashman, so I'll do that. You know, it was just the opportunities were there as the thing. So, and again, I'm always willing to help and do things, and again, just learn. There's nothing, you know, I love more than kind of learning new things. So, so yeah. But then in terms of Octomore, I suppose again, working obviously, like you say, following Alan's footsteps and mashing, stilling, working in the warehouse, you're kind of working with those casks and you know, filling them and emptying them and all these kind of things. But in terms of actually kind of working with Jim a bit more, probably in amongst I remember working on the Octomore 6 and 7 series a little bit with him, and then he retired obviously in 2015, and then we brought out the Octomore 8s. And you know, obviously with Octomore, we kind of, over the years of those early releases, like say bringing it out at 5 years, it was always, you know, this kind of framework that we have today was kind of developing. So like you say, it's a bit of a challenge because Octomore is high peat, high strength, young age. But again, when you start tasting it, you realise that whiskey's more than just the numbers, so that's always a bit of a challenge. But that framework was going, obviously, bottling it at 5 years, but when I kind of released those 8s for the first time, they were the only ones bottled at 8 years. So I don't know if I got that right or wrong, but again, it was about experimentation.
And we forgot to ask him if he could count, and clearly turns out
No, I couldn't.
Five can look like an 8 when it's handwritten, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
So
you're right.
So not
you're right.
only did you make it the oldest and probably cost us a fortune, but you used the highest, most heavily peated malt we had.
I just couldn't wait to get to that. But,
It's just like give it all away.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've got to make
Did I
it
ever
mark
tell
somehow.
the story about how, the first time I ever met Adam? No, it was probably a couple of years before, like Adam started, maybe a summer before. So probably that would be 2003.
I'm just going to step out.
No, obviously, I started with the business in 2001, and in my previous life, I was a painter and decorator, so we used to do a lot of the maintenance work here. In the summer, Jim was always fanatical about getting the place looking spick and span for the festival. So it was always this May deadline. I was always tasked with painting the distillery, and I would get a few helpers. Anyway, this day, Duncan McGilvery came to me. He says, "There's a young boy there, the young boy Hannah. He's looking to borrow one of the ladders. He's painting Anne MacDonald's house over there." So Anne MacDonald lives in one of the guest houses just over the other side of the mini market, and I says, "All right, I'll get my ladder, so that's fine." So then this young boy, bushy hair, this big bushy hair.
Handsome he was.
Well, he was quite short, and I says, "Well, what size of ladder is you need?" And he says, "Quite a big house." So, and this was the first time I met Adam, so I gave him a ladder, but it was like the ladder we had was huge, like it was massive. So I thought, he's not going to manage to lift this. So
It's made out of iron.
it was a big like cast iron. So I said to Duncan, "I'll just go with the boy and give him a hand lifting this ladder up to make sure it's okay and it's safe." So I went over with him, but then I thought, the boy's quite good at painting, so I said to Duncan, "You'll be one to keep an eye on." So yeah, it was through his merits of painting he got a job.
You can push him up the ladder for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I think the 8s. What a way to start! What a way to start the journey to Octomore. Like, I know, like people out there. I mean, we get emails all the time going, "Have you any Octomore 8.3 sitting around?" And for those of you who don't know, 8.3 is the most heavily peated whiskey ever released that we're aware of, and certainly the most heavily peated we done. 309.1 parts per million was the phenols and the barley, and I think we do have some hidden away somewhere for a rainy day. Not today, unfortunately, but yeah, really, I mean, especially when we started talking about the 15.3, which we're not tonight, that was last year's release, but again, it was very close to 15.3 at 307.9. So when that came out, everybody was talking about the comparison between that and 8.3. So what a way to start your journey with that particular liquid. We'll get a wee taste of the 16.1, I suppose. We could. I've been waiting here all night for this, but while we pick these up and start, it would be cool just to frame the conversation around. I think it was Peter, aka PT Pete. I like that. What's your favourite Octomore ever? Not of this current
There's been
range.
a few, yeah. There's a few memorable ones. I think 4.2 Comus was one that always kind of was one that stood out. Was it 2.2 was Orpheus, wasn't
Orpheus,
it?
yeah.
That was another one.
Oh, the other way around actually. I think Orpheus. Yeah, Orpheus was the.
I remember we got access to some Orpheus when I first started with the business because the tins were we ran out of tins, or there was scratches in the bottles or something like that. But we were able to buy some bottles of Orpheus for like £80, and I was like, oh, beauty, big whiskey drinker.
Yeah.
Bought a pile off them, tanned them, and then like you see them now at the secondary market going for eye-watering sums. But I enjoyed them. So I enjoyed them.
Great
that's
whiskies.
amazing.
Great whiskies. And actually, with both of those, we actually have still a remnant of those whiskies left in the cask in the warehouses.
Yeah.
So we've got one cask left of the 2005, which is the Comus
Yeah.
and the Sauterne, and 2 or 3 casks of the Orpheus,
Yeah.
and they were great at 5.
Aye.
But I tell you, there's something special when they hit 20. They're
Well,
amazing.
that was one of the things again we started discovering, because again with our journey that we were on in the early days when we created Octomore, it was we were buying all sorts of different types of wood and you know, being very explorational with the maturation. And you know, there was a Jim was, you know, he would try anything once, you know, and he always said the saying, like, you know, if you never try, you'll never know.
Yeah, that's it.
But you know, again, on paper you would think, right, something really, really smoky, is it going to work with that type of cask? Where like a Sauterne wine, is it going to give that, you know, is it going to overpower it? You're going to get any influence from it. But the magical thing with Octomore is that it worked perfectly in balance, because you had some sweetness there, and that sweetness from the Sauterne came through, and you know, you didn't really, the phenols and the sweetness kind of worked, they complement each other, as opposed to a contrast where. And it never ceased to amaze us, you know, like even today, like, you know, when, you know, you talk about, like, you know, even remnants have been in these, the whiskey's been in these casks for, like, you know, 20 odd years, and it actually still...
It still stands up.
Yeah.
Again, it's the gentle kind of floral notes that are still at the floor, that's the thing.
I talk to people about the balance, like with Bruichladdich, the unpeated single malts. The balance, you're more protective of the balance, so it's like bourbon maturation. It works really well with the Bruichladdich, because you've got a really gentle, trickle distilled, unpeated whiskey. So you don't want to overpower it with a cask, because we have played obviously with sherry and all the rest of it, but finding a nice balance between bourbon and Bruichladdich is really, really nice. But I think with Octomore, because on one side of the liquid you've got all the cask strength, you've got all the phenols, you've got all this power young spirit. You can balance it with more hardcore sort of casks. Is the way it sort of works in my brain. And I think for me, my favourite one ever is the 10.4. I think randomly, it's not one that we talk about all the time. 3 years old, virgin oak, and I don't think it's even because it's the one that I think tastes the best out of all the ones I've had. It's just because it's 3 years old, it's in virgin oak, and when you go to taste it, it's like you're overstimulated. There's so much going on in that you can spend hours with it, and it's a 3-year-old spirit.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So it's more about the experience for me with that one, and actually talking about Katie Smith, who hates our Gillies. Katie used to be a brand manager in The Botanist, and we were working up the stairs one day, and we happened to stumble into a room where there was a panel tasting for the Octomores, and I think, if I'm right in saying, the first Octomore Katie tasted was the 10.4 or the version before it went to bottling. And Katie, not being a massive whiskey drinker, she is now because she's in charge of this brand, funnily enough, but she couldn't believe that, you know, she had an experience with that spirit, and that is somebody that was not used to the, you know,
that's that point
world.
of discovery I was talking about. Like, it's
totally,
such, you know, when people discover it, it's, you know, it's a game changer. It does. One of the unique things again about the style of Octomore that, you know, it stayed true right through is that woody campfire aroma that, because of the source of peat and the origin of peat, we get that kind of dry woody smoke, and you know, again, it pairs with rich, you know, like cask, like virgin oak. you get that kind of almost like meaty barbecue note that comes through, and it works because it's a drier smoke. Whereas if you had something more oily medicinal, it might not pair as well. You know, it might. So yeah, I think like Octomore has always had that kind of dry smoke, that woody smoke that's, you know, just works with the balance.
I feel embarrassed myself here, but I'm sure.
Not again, sure.
I know. The 11.2 was one that I was a massive fan of as well. You mentioned Sauterne cask. I think that might. I'm not going to put you in the spot and ask you to confirm. It was a wine cask. It was a wine cask getting, I think, the 11.2. It was like almost like a peachy colour, but that was incredible. That was an incredible whiskey as well. But some of the lesser known ones are the ones that I tend to spend a bit more time with. But
one of the most memorable ones again, and again it's one of your creations, was the OBA.
Oh, aye.
You know, that was again.
That's something. But I think somebody actually asked, funnily enough. And I'm skipping again. Katie's going to give me the eye here because I'm skipping the questions here. But they said, will there be another Octomore concept release in the future? If so, is there any information you can share? This was supposed to be one of the last questions, by the way, so I'm in for a row probably.
Well, that's it. But I'll probably say something I shouldn't say. But I think like so the OBA that we created was. Again, a bit like Octomore itself. It was just a bit of a creation, playing around with different things, and I created a few bottles for the masterclass at the Fish a few years back.
Fairly well.
And it did. Yeah. And then there was a bit of a campaign from a group of, I think, the Swedish guys who, like, we want more of this OBA. So we thought, well, why not? You know, we made a small batch. Again, this year, the polyphonic Octomore was a similar kind of concept, you know,
sort of style,
I mean, again, actually going back to talking about that Orpheus, when we were tasting that at a really old age, it kind of made me think, you know, there's something incredible about it. So, like, we've made these amazing old whiskies, and they're still sitting there, they're developing in a different way. So actually, those kind of greatest hits almost came back together with polyphonic to kind of create something in that multi-vintage, different, you know, just looking at Octomore in a different way. But I think that's the beauty of the spirit. Just as we've been discussing there, that, you know, the cask types and the things and the phenol levels, each kind of aspect of making whiskey, whether it's cask, age, the phenol level, we're creating something new every time. So every batch, all these whiskies. So when we've been making Octomore for since 2002, so 20 odd years.
23.
Thank you. See, you're not very good at maths. You're right.
Before you start.
So 23 years. But how many releases have we got? How many different flavours? How many different casks? How many different things out there? And it's not just about making whiskey the same all the time. It's those little discoveries, and where you find. It's great to have all the differences, but when you find the similarities, you know, you might find that a ppm is quite close from one vintage to the next, and that's something you can kind of look at and compare. And then you start to think about, well, if the ppm is quite similar, again, to your point about the peat, you know, how's that peat coming across, even if it's the same kind of level, or what about the distillation or the barley or the all of these different factors are there, I think, to be able to come through.
I kind of know this, but I'm going to ask it you, because for the audience is, do you find, like, when you're tasting Octomore, like 18, 20-year-olds, right? What do you think? Is the phenol still as pronounced as they were when they're young, or is it?
Well, it's interestingly, just again, while we were talking, I was nosing the 16.1, and the phenols aren't very pronounced. So this is 5 years, again, those phenols are definitely in there. But they're not very pronounced. To me, that's the quality of the spirit. That, like, say, that distillation, looking for the oils, the viscosity that's carrying the flavour. So you've got the barley notes. You get this nice caramel, kind of creamy coconut notes from the wood, and the smoke is kind of hidden there.
Yeah.
So it's funny that I think when you taste something like this that should be so kind of strong and powerful and smoky, it's really not. The balance is in there. So, but when you taste an older Octomore, I think, again, you've got a bit more complexity from the cask. Again, the phenol is not the thing that is leaping out the glass. You know, the time in the wood is bringing a little bit more flavour, a bit more influence. So, and again, depending on the type of cask, if it's French oak, American oak, again, what first fill, second fill. And there's different ways of thinking about, again, maybe if we fill more second fill casks, then maybe you do get a bit more of the peat influence. But I think there's one of the great things is bottling Octomore very young. I mean, these are the 5-year-old whiskies. it makes you think very differently about age is one thing, but when we do start to bottle Octomore, maybe at 10 or kind of 15 as it gets a little bit older with the polyphonic, some of those stocks that, again, we're leaving behind a little bit, a bit longer, so maybe a 20-year-old Octomore, it's incredibly elegant. And I think that's the thing that you always have with the spirit. It's that delicacy, that floral notes that are always in there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the lovely things that you really get with it.
In the 16.1, Adam, always, obviously, for those who don't know, the 16.1, the 0.1 in the series is always the baseline to the experiment, essentially. We've got 4 products out this year. The 0.1 is always the baseline to the experiment, which is always generally 5 years, unless you break the rules. And it's always a bourbon cask. So this is bourbon cask matured, 5 years old.
Absolutely,
ppm 100 or so, isn't it? 1.4, I think,
That's
something
right.
like that.
That's right. I think you're right with the 0.1. It's that control. It's that like we say, it's the most. We know you say we're talking about Bruichladdich. We know that bourbon's always going to work well with the quality of spirit. They say we're distilling Bruichladdich, put Charlotte and Octomore in the same style, in the same way. So we know that bourbon's going to go really well. And again, that tightness of the American oak and that sweetness you get through works really nicely with the spirit.
Yeah.
But it's allowing the flavour of the grain to really come through. It's allowing that smoke to really come through. And to me, it's just it shouldn't work. There's not many brands, there's not many distilleries out there, I think, that are going to release something at 5 years old, high strength, high level of peat, and do it with just complete faith that the quality is going to be good. That you, on the face of it, we always say that it's like that impossible equation. It shouldn't work.
Yeah.
But when you nose it, when you taste it, I mean, nosing that again, it's kind of almost 60% alcohol. So you've got this lovely softness. I'm not getting anything aggressive from the alcohol at all. You get that sweetness, those kind of delicate floral notes. It's got nice honey sweetness. Again, the American oaks bring in that caramel, that custard. And
but with it being cask strength, I think that helps, like the balance. You wouldn't actually assume that if it's 60%, what is it? Is it 59 or 60?
59 to 60. You're going to put us in the spot here. So we're 101.4 for the 16.1, and we're 59.3%.
You get confused because there's so many releases, and then they're all different strengths. But again, but it's right. It's always right about 59, 60,
61 usually. Yeah.
And with the high percentage of alcohol, you would think that it's going to be really powerful and strong, but and it is, but the phenols are kind of held up in that higher alcohol, and obviously if you add water to it, you dilute that, and the phenols start to open up. But it helps on the nose with the balance, because you've got that smoke coming through just subtly. You get more of the sweetness, more of the from the cask, the vanilla. And I think when you start to, when you taste it, it starts to, the phenols start to become more apparent on the palate.
Should we have a taste?
Yeah, well,
I've been drinking it.
I've
been drinking it.
Right about it.
Yeah, I've nearly finished.
I'll catch up then.
I actually, again, I'm not here to tell any lies. Before we started, I had a wee taste of each, because I haven't actually tasted them all side by side. I've had them all in different settings and at different times. But with the 16.4, having been pretty new, I've not sat with the 4. But it's amazing, even the difference in the 15 minutes that we've sat and had a conversation since we poured these. Even just that little bit of evaporation of the alcohol, just it's actually a slightly quite a different drinking experience compared to that fly when I had at the start. Just as it sat and opened up slightly with the air around it. Axel asked what makes Octomore so different that it performs well even as a young whisky, and is it just due to the intensely smoky malt? So I think what you've covered there, I hope, Axel, that you got that question answered, because there's quite a lot of detail there. The 16.1, Ellen asks a really interesting question, actually, and it's something that sticks out to me as 15.1 is 5 years old, it's bourbon casks. 16.1 is 5 years old, it's bourbon casks. The ABV are very similar. So Ellen asked, what's the significant difference between the two, because she feels that the 15.1 is both sweeter and smokier. So what's the difference between the 15.1 and the 16.1, rather than just in the face of what the makeup of the product is?
I think again that kind of level of detail and comparison is one of the great things about Octomore, that on the face of it, they're both 5-year-old whiskies matured in the same kind of way. There's very little difference. They should taste very, very similar, but they're very, very different. And actually, like you say, that 15.1, and I've just tasted the 16.1, it was sweeter. You know, there was something a bit more there. In terms of the cask there, we actually used some what we call de-char, re-char casks, so kind of casks that have been rejuvenated. So once we've used them a couple of times, obviously, you know, when you fill a cask and it's drawing, the whiskey's drawing flavour from the wood, there comes a point where there's not much left to give. Now, what we would do at that point is then send the cask, you know, rather than see it, you know, kind of, we don't need that anymore, it's not going to give us anything. We work with the cooperage and they'll shave the inside, so the wood that's been toasted they'll remove, so just 2 or 3 mils they'll shave out, and then they'll re-char that cask, so they'll burn it again, and that's again going into fresh wood. It's kind of caramelising those flavours, so you get effectively a brand new barrel coming back. So rather than just go, right, we've used the cask a few times, let's sell it on, let's make flower pots out of it. It's, you know, if you think of an oak tree that's taken 200 years to grow, and then we use it for a few years and go, let's chuck it away, let's be, you know, use them again.
And very different to seasoning as well.
Oh, very different, very different.
That's not something we spend a lot of time on, but the de-char, re-chars, something that's really...
It's absolutely, it's just rejuvenating the wood, it's accessing fresh wood in the stave and caramelising it and toasting it. We obviously specify how we want that cask toasted, so we can, you know, kind of extract flavours in particular ways, what we're looking for. So we use some of those casks in the 15.1, which was kind of one of the first times we've actually kind of brought something to bottling that had been aged in these casks. But the quality is absolutely incredible, but it will bring more sweetness from the wood, more caramelisation from the wood, so that will be part of it. The other thing I think is probably key to this is that, again, quality of distillation. We're always bringing those oils through, but you're going to get a difference in the grain each time. So we're not mixing different vintages. Everything is very singular with Octomore. It's one vintage, it's one harvest, it's one kind of moment in time that's being distilled. So how that grain shows up, how much sweetness you get from the grain itself will play a big part in there as well.
And also the environment, because like today is a perfect example of the weather conditions we have. So like at Octomore, we don't mature all the Octomore in one warehouse in one location. So they're in various locations around the distillery. So when Adam's selecting casks, he might be picking casks from a specific location. So where it's been rested for 5 years will have an impact on the
if it's
flavour.
higher up, it's going to evaporate more. If it's lower,
that's right. Humidity. Is it? Yeah, that's exactly it.
We talk a lot about the climate that we're in, and everyone knows what the angel share is, and that 1 to 2% of a cask's volume can be lost a year to evaporation. And I remember Jim McEwen himself saying years ago, I think it was actually on a documentary, a TV documentary, but he said, if a cask is breathing out, it's sure as hell breathing in. Something has to do that.
And as over time, as the level decreases, it's been replaced with that air. And obviously on Isla here, we're so close to the sea, the Atlantic Ocean, and we get these storms coming in.
We're going to have the helicopter out of here after that. I got a message there, and they've confirmed that they'll pick us up to get us home after that. It's so important to us, isn't it? That maturation is just so important to us. Everything to be mature, not just Octomore as we're doing here.
I think probably a bit more detail on it again to get a bit more kind of geeky about it, but a bourbon cask is not just exactly the same all the time. So we're sourcing, again with the Speyside cooperage, we'll be looking to get a range of different types of casks. So you might fill, again, it might be a bourbon cask that's been used for 5 years one year, it might be 3 years the next year. Again, there'll be different toast level or char levels that bourbon producer has specified as well. So the variety you'll get in bourbon barrels is quite. I think in the industry it tends to be a bourbon barrel is just the kind of the standard. But actually in amongst that you get a lot of variation as well.
You only have to look through the warehouse and see the stamps in the back of the bourbon cask, and you're like, it's something great names, incredible. Talking about the old stuff, before we go on and talk a wee bit more about 16.2, I've talked a bit about it recently to a few guests we've had, and I'm lucky enough, obviously, to host. My team hosts some VIPs and hosts different amazing experiences at the distillery, and sometimes in the right circumstances, when you both are in a good mood, we get
That's all the time, man.
we get access to some amazing casks, and there's a particular Octomore cask in the back of warehouse 11, I think, that sits out the way, and it's down in the corner. I call it the flower because it's a very dark, old, weather like this outside. It's freezing cold, it's damp, but it's dark. But there's this wee flower in the corner that just calls me every time I go in, and. It's a wine cask, Octomore. It's the age now will be something like
2009. So again, I can't do the maths on that. But
it'll be about 16, something
14,
like that.
15 years old.
And I remember when you first said to me, I had a group over, and you said, look, it's big Octomore fans, and take them in, give them a wee dram of that cask. They'll really appreciate it, and in fact, you'd asked me to come out and work a Saturday to host these particular people, and I'm going, working a Saturday? I don't work Saturdays. I'll come out and do it, fine. And then you'd pointed me towards this cask, and opened it, and it was full. It was pretty full at the time, and I had a few drams out it, and talking of experience and discovery, that was a discovery like I've never had before. And
I'll need to go and check the.
Well,
I think the levels have gone down.
The last time I was up, I was trying to get the Valencia, and I was like, oh no, I didn't get it on the side. So unfortunately, I think there was only 1 or 2 casks of that. I think, and I think for anyone who came to a warehouse experience at the distillery at the visitor centre here over the summer, they got access to the sister cask of that one for a spell. It went very quickly as well, but. For me, again, talking about aged Octomore, talking about experiential whisky and discovering something new, for me that cask was just like
fantastic,
unbelievable, just like incredible.
To your point there's not very much of it. But it was absolutely incredible, and the people who did get to taste it weren't experienced. But
and everyone that tasted that, it was like, you're in this dark, dank, cold warehouse, and it's like that sort of like, the moonlight just suddenly comes in and lights it up, and it's completely, it's like, again, talking to Jim, just like the Jim McEwan's patter back in the day, you can hear just in the distance the orchestra playing as you're having this experience. Exactly, So I think I'm really excited about some of the stuff that we might see, when we're playing with these kind of ideas and the older stuff in a few years. I just hope I can afford a bottle. That's the only thing. But yeah, so that's great. So 16.1, the key things. This is the base of the experiment in the 4. It's 101.4 ppm. It's 59.3% alcohol, matured again in some amazing American bourbon casks. The 16.2. is essentially, correct me if I'm wrong, essentially the same spirit.
Exactly the same spirit,
And the idea is that we're experimenting, and we've got an opportunity here to compare the influence of the cask on the spirit. So if you want to tell us a wee bit more about that.
Absolutely. I think again, as we talked about before, that kind of framework of exploring different parts of whisky. So the point 1 is always that kind of standard, that kind of point from which we can then think about different elements that affect the flavour. And what's great in this edition, with the 16.1 and point 2 being effectively from kind of that same batch of distillation, the point 1 obviously matured in bourbon, but the point 2 is matured in quite a wide variety of different second fill wine casks. And then after a few years of maturation, what we have done is take some of those second fill wine casks and kind of recask half of them into first fill Madeira. I think it's something like 45%.
And we do get asked these questions.
Yeah. And the reason
if Luke and France is watching, we know we get asked these questions.
The reason I know that is because I worked it out for Katie earlier on today to answer that question.
And answer the question,
So let's say for this 50-50. So half
don't talk about percentages, because you're going to dig yourself into a hole here.
You're absolutely
You're
right.
going to end up coming to 120.
I know,
it's going to be 120% by the time you finish.
Yeah, that's it. Katie, I think you might have to check the things, check the percentages. So anyway, so let's say 50-50. Madeira and Moscatel.
Yeah.
So we kind of recask it, bring it into fresh cask, so kind of Portuguese sweet wines, and then at the point of bottling, we're bringing those two parcels back together to mix. And so the same spirit, but this is all about that completely different cask maturation and how that affects the spirit. So nosing that again, the quality of those casks. I mean, that is dried fruit, the sweetness, again, that smokiness is really, really hidden. But the sweetness is what's coming through. So to me, that's dried fruit, kind of candied peels. You know, got lots of dates and figs and
The apricots as well.
yeah, it really just is that kind of sweet kind of fruit, almost like tinned peaches. You know, that kind of the syrup and the. So again, when you nose that, you're getting all this incredible power from the wood. Because again, it's the quality of cask we want to showcase, and then how that works. We were talking a bit about that smoky sweetness that you'll taste on the palate. So again, I'd probably be behind as I'm talking, so I'm going to have a little dram here.
Yeah. I think there's more, it seems a bit more texture to that as well, like on the palate and the tongue, you know, like you can feel it a lot more. It's
There's
much
a
more.
lot goes on. A lot goes on.
It's funny, I drink a lot of whiskey, socially and professionally. Not as much as you professionally. So I'm a very lucky boy, but even with the experience I've got and the amount of Octomore I've had over the years, I set them side by side in a blind tasting, and I am never in a million years saying that's the same liquid. Never in a million years. As you say, the baselines are there, so the classic Octomore style is there, and we know what we're expecting with that. But as you say, mouthfeel, viscosity, there's a difference in that. There's a difference right through from flavour profile. The whole experience is a completely different thing. Again, that just for me, that's why this is so important. Is being able to sit with, again, compare and try and work that out.
Sure, it's interesting. I mean, again, that when you taste that and you get that kind of progression of flavour, and you get this really lovely kind of fragrant kind of fruit notes coming through, and just after that, there's you get it on the 0.1 and you get it on the 0.2, and that's probably the only similarity you get is this kind of almost a dryness, almost like a graphite kind of note coming through. And going back to that question about the 0.1, the 15.1 and the 16.1, again, part of that is going to be from the grain, from the distillation, from the spirit, because you're going to get different flavours coming through.
Yeah.
But there is that similarity that you notice. Again, maybe, well, hopefully that's my job. I have to be paying attention to these kind of things and picking it up. But I think that's definitely something. There is a similarity, even though they are so different whiskies. On the face of it, when you nose it, you still pick up little bits of the DNA that connect them, which I think is really important.
And as you spend more time with it and go back, and I've done it before, but go back and forth between the two, and then you start to go, oh well, I'm getting that there actually. And as Alan said earlier, adding a wee drop of water and just opening up slightly, it's a crazy experience. I think we worked very recently on a series of aged gins. We aged gin in some amazing casks, and we released them recently. And earlier this year, we brought some amazing bartenders over from across the world, amazing bars in loads of different countries, and they spent a few days in Islay, and they were tasked to work with these spirits, these amazing aged gins, and find the best serves, and help us as people in that industry to say how should we serve these amazing spirits. And they all stayed on site at the distillery, and we left them a few bottles of Octomore and some other bits in the house. And just before they left, we were catching up with them, and they said, we've nailed Octomore. The serve for Octomore, we have nailed it. And I was like, oh, okay, right. And Katie was there, and okay, right, fair enough. Right, what are you doing? The smoky cokey. The best bartenders in the world had spent an entire night drinking Octomore and Coke.
Oh,
right,
no.
That's it. There's only so much you can do.
And by the way, I've not tried it yet, but it's funny when I'm sitting tasting that, and there's so much going on. It's still such a versatile spirit. I do not recommend drinking it with Coke. Right, the best bartenders in the world might, but for me, it's just an example of the guardrails are there, but there's so much to do with these sort of liquids. The way, you know, from maturation profile and, you know, stylus distillation and, you know, casks and barley and all the rest of it. It's such a spectrum. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, and you're right. I think one of the great things about Octomore is, and the way we lay it out, and the way we have these different expressions, and we'll taste the 0.3 and the 0.4 shortly. But it's all about celebrating those differences. That what makes a whiskey special. You know, there's no stories of like bagpipes or eagles soaring over glens or anything like that. This is just actually trying to bring it back to the spirit, the distillation, the cask, all of those things that I think you'd say which warehouse it is. Those details are what make this whiskey different every time. And rather than trying to make a whiskey where we just make it taste the same all the time, you focus on making it the same, you'll make great whiskey, you make good whiskey that way. But doing this, like that, you're talking about that Sauternes cask, the 2009, there was so little of it, and the world doesn't get to taste it. But that we got to make something incredible. We got to hit that peak because we didn't try and make it homogenized and the same for everyone. You know, it's that's one of the things I'm really proud of with Octomore. It changes, it evolves, it's different things, and it's a great conversation piece as well.
And I mean, I suppose maybe just to be clear as well, like since 2002 till today, we've never specified to the maltsters like Octomore needs to be this level of ppm. Whatever batch, whatever ppm it comes out, we'll take it. You know, so like if it comes out at 80, we take it. If it's 140, we take it. If it's 300, we'll take it. You know, so and it will vary to Adam's point. So there's never been a, you know, so but that's the great thing about it, because then you know, through the journey of the Octomore series, you're seeing ups and downs, seeing variation along the way, because we're not just releasing 16 versions of whiskey that are all the same ppm, all the same cask types, and then you've got that consistency.
That's a really nice segue, actually. You'd think we knew what we're doing here.
We on script,
Fiona asked a question, actually sent in a question. She asked, can you talk about how the character of Octomore has evolved over the years? Has it always been about refining it, or are any changes over the years just down to each harvest in the cask mix? Thanks for all you do, Fiona says. But I think we've talked a bit about the evolution over the years, but when you're working with it, you guys from the production side, the view right through the maturation, are you looking at refining and trying to find the best way, or is it just about exploration and trying new things? There's a bit of both.
I suppose, there's different things, different kind of angles to that kind of question. I think, like you say, in terms of and it was really good, you know, hearing you talk about that first distillation and trying to shape that spirit and see what it came out like. And you know, I think over the years we have probably looked at how we distill and how you could get more phenols or what you could do, but certainly for the last probably 15 years it's been very consistent in how we distill, because we know when we make Bruichladdich the quality of that spirit is incredible. So we hit a flavour there, there's no impurities, the stills, the way that they're so thin and tall and narrow, you get this lovely contact with copper, and you get an elegance and cleanliness in the spirit. And we do the same with Octomore and see where those phenols fit. So I think there's elements there where that's how we distill. But there's also the experimentation with it, where in terms of the cask, or in terms of the barley variety, or in terms of you know, the idea with the 0.3 and the focus on which field it's come from, which barley, and all these kind of things. That's where the experimentation comes in. But the constant is that we make great spirit, and that's what allows all these other flavours to come through.
The variables are pretty much as Adam described. So like the distillation's consistent, but then the variables are like, you know, from year to year. It could be the aging, you know, in terms of the cask that Adam selects, or the location, the phenols obviously that are, you know, in the malting process, they'll be a variable, and the like during the maturation, you know, like again, well, there is an opportunity to double age as well, like in terms of taking from cask to cask. So like we predominantly fill bourbon casks, and then we'll put some down into different types of casks along the way. But actually, over the years, we've become quite renowned at, you know, saying, well, let's take this whiskey on a journey and actually transfer it from, it's been so long in this cask, and put it onto something different and take it on. So there's a few variables that lead into our kind of innovation pipeline that we can do, we work with. And we're always curious, you know. I think that's the thing from 2001 till now is, you know, that tying into our kind of progressive Hebridean distillers, is that that curiosity of like, if we just keep doing the same things, we keep getting the same results. You know, life would be quite bland and boring. Whereas, actually, if we always keep asking ourselves, "What if?" and you know, like Adam said, it's like the possible equation. You know, but if we keep, it's not something which we try to refine. It's just that curiosity of like, what if we do this? What will happen? And you know, and because it's new as well, like that's the great thing about it. It's not something that's existed for hundreds of years, so we must respect the like the recipe and not, you know, we don't want to mess it up. So you're trying. This is new, so like there was no kind of like, you know, recipe that we could do. And Jim put us in a great path because he was one for. He didn't like consistency. You know, he wanted more variation. That's why, like, even across our range, we have different releases because, you know, whiskey is a natural, you know, thing. It's a natural product where the barley comes from it's natural water. We distill it, we age it, and it's in wood, which is natural, the environment. So it's going to vary. You know.
Do you know, something just popped into my head there, a little bit of a flashback, a bit of a memory from, because you know, Jim would always have these kind of you'd find quotes and he'd print them out, put them on his wall. And there was a great one, consistency shows a lack of imagination.
That's
and that's
true,
one that I think is,
That's nice.
Yeah.
You'll say you made that one up as well.
Well, maybe you did.
I think when I talk to people from all over the world who come in here every day, and I think I've always talked about the only time you'll ever see consistency from McGladdy is in quality. It's consistency of quality. I've heard both of you at different times saying, you know, we've tried experiments with a spirit in a wood that haven't worked, and therefore we will not release that spirit, and you know, unless we can find a way to make it work and make it ready. And we're not the type of people who are just going to say, well, actually we've done that, we better get out and sell it, and it's a one-off. The consistency with us isn't the quality, but that's it. That's where it ends for me and from my experience. Although consistency of quality, there's a question in here from Adam Hannett that says, why did the quality of spirit we produced get better in 2017? That's when I left the mash house and left production. I don't know why that's came up.
It was specific. It was addressed to Alan, that question, but it was specifically in the mashing. We
just the mashing was better. Funnily enough, after I departed.
Well, the yield certainly went up because we stopped. Rab was notorious for overflowing the tanks, so we gave him a promotion into the marketing side of the business to keep him away from.
10 jobs came up while I was mashing, and Alan kept saying to me, you'd be great at that job.
Yeah, that's right.
So good at that. I don't know where that.
You've just got natural gift. But yields have increased. Yeah,
that's it. The water consumption's gone down a bit as well.
Yes.
We'll move on very quickly. Anyway, so good. So 16.2, exact same liquid as the 0.1. It's 101.4 ppm. It's a very similar ABV. I believe it's just slightly different.
Just slightly again, because we've been recasking, you'll find it a bit lower. So 58.1.
58.1% in this one, and then it's that combination the of the wine casks with the recasking into the Madeira and Moscatel. A really interesting. A really interesting makeup, and again an amazing segue from me, as professional as I am. So Menno asked a question: how are casks selected? So why one cask and not another? And how do the 4 types of casks for the 16.2 get selected? Is there a science behind it, or is it mostly experimentation? Or to add on to that, is it mostly just you winging it completely?
Well, there's a bit of both in there. I think again we know, with Octomore, with all our spirits, we know that a bourbon cask is going to work really well. You know, that's going to be a great base, and obviously with the way we're looking at things, for the 0.1, we're always going to fill those bourbon barrels and see how they shake through. With the 0.2s, again, we've got access to amazing casks, great contacts around the world, and I think it's kind of looking to see often what have we not done. Because again, to your point, we've only been making Octomore for 20-something years.
I think it's 28.
It's me doing the maths. It was 40 years ago. No, but do you know what I mean? It's still quite a new brand, and what we've been doing with trying different types of casks is just to see how that spirit shapes up, and then that allows us with the 0.2 to kind of bottle those to kind of share people as we're finding out those results to bottle them and let people kind of taste along with us. But again, what you do is you build up the knowledge, and you know that actually using a second fill wine cask is going to give you a really nice structure of the oak whiskey, a really nice base, and then that first fill you're going to get more influence from the wine or the spirit that was in that cask before. So for me, I think it's great to kind of keep building that knowledge, trying new things, but what you do learn, you then put back in to be able to kind of keep progressing, keep moving forward. Yeah. So a bit of both, I think.
I think it's amazing. I think, again, just looking in from the outside, when we come up to the warehouse to spend some time up there with guests or whoever it might be, you know, your sample room, it's very scientific in a way. It's very, in terms of look and feel, it's all these samples, and it could be a laboratory, for lack of a better word. But I think the one thing that probably sticks out for me in the work that you do, and Alan and his team, but led by you, do is, over the course of the years, so back in 2001 we had sherry casks and bourbon casks and maybe a wee smattering of wine in the early days, and now, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we've got something like 250 to 300 different cask types in the warehouses, which we didn't have obviously back in those days. So I suppose, although you'll have that knowledge and experience to say, well, I know how that might work with that and how that might work with that, you'll be finding new casks all the time, I assume, to be saying, well, let's learn about this one now, and how does that react with that spirit, and how does that...
Yeah, and even when we do find, you know, I'm just thinking there's some an Italian vineyard, some winemakers we started working with a few years ago, and so we filled some Octomore into these casks, and it was only, I don't know, half a dozen casks we got, so a little try, and I remember, you know, after a year, going and trying that just to see what the influence of these was, and you've got this beautiful bright pink, incredible flavour, and it's just, you know, it's brand new doing something like that, which is great, you know, get these amazing flavours. But even when you use you know, the same vineyard different years, you're going to get different, depending on how they've used their casks, you're going to get differences in there as well. So so yeah, I think the whole thing is just great fun, and it's new all the time, and like you say, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, I think that's the whole thing. Like, from the beginning, like, we've had the freedom to be creative, you know, rather than just, as I said earlier, like, keep doing the same to make a recipe to a formula. We can be creative. So, like, you know, we don't say to Adam at the beginning of the year, like, you must buy so many casks, this types of casks to make this product. Adam has the freedom to go out and explore and shop around to see what casks he can get. And, you know, often, like, when you're talking about the amount of variation of casks we have in the warehouse, you know, I often, like, explain to people that it's a bit like when you're cooking at home, the more ingredients you have, like, even like herbs and spices that you can just season a meal or do different, you know, it gives you more option. It's the same in the warehouse. Like, Adam can go in and pick, and some of these casks can give different flavours that will, you know, just help, you know, like, create what Adam wants to create, as opposed to just having a few different options. If you've only got a few ingredients in the house, you're limited to what you can make.
This is true. I think there's something in the fact that, again, that freedom to go and meet people and discussing and come up with casks, and you find things that I always think, so Fernando di Castilla is a great example. So they're a sherry bodega, got a great relationship with them, but I won't go and say to Jan, I need X amount of casks and I want the same thing every year. When he's emptying casks, you know, again, the way they're making their sherry, if he empties some 30-year-old Pedro Jimenez casks and he says, right, you know, phones up, would you like them? You know, it's not something we've planned in, it's just he's decided that's the right time to bottle, then maybe we get those casks. And so there's things like that, you can always find things at their peak. So rather than trying to find things that consistently follow a formula, it's about when something becomes amazing, it becomes available that is amazing, that's an opportunity to try something new.
And there's been adjustment. I mean, obviously the Scotch whisky is strictly regulated, and certainly the usage of different casks has been as well. There was relaxations in recent years about the types of casks and styles of casks that you can use as well, which has really opened up. We had some Calvados influence in Octomore recently and stuff like that, which was something you couldn't even really use in whisky maturation before. So I think, again, it's really interesting to hear that. Cool, okay, so cask exploration. The next step, I suppose, in the Octomore series into the 0.3 is in barley. So again, the 0.3 is always Isla Barley. It's always the Octomore of Octomore, as we would say. We mentioned James Brown, famously known as the godfather of soil. I don't know who coined that. I say it all the time. I don't know whether
Himself,
I cringe or laugh, but well, maybe it was him that coined it. The point 3 is always the differentiator, I suppose, in the range is that it's always Isla Barley. But again, those guardrails aren't there. There's no rules to say we must mature in this cask, we must mature in that cask. But it's a showcase of that year's harvest. Octomore whisky, distilled at Bruichladdich and using barley specifically grown on Octomore farm down the road from us. So this year, the point 3, Adam, you can give us a wee bit about it. That'd be great. Well, I just going for a wee.
Absolutely, have a little taste now. So this year, again, you say 5 years old. From again, this is a whisky from Octomore farm. So it's Isla grown barley, but Octomore grown barley, as you say. With this one, again, it's really trying to think about how we can explore. Like we know, and we've done this over the years, we're growing barley on Isla, that the spirit we distill with Isla grown barley tastes different. The spirit comes across different, and we can see when you look at the yields and the kind of the way the spirit's produced, you can see that we don't distill as much alcohol. And we know all of the different things when you have it malted, and you see the different parameters, and maybe the germination's a bit higher, the nitrogen's a bit higher than those strict malting kind of parameters. They're all driven by yield.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think what's great about this is that we malt this anyway. We're looking to do it because for us it's about flavour. I've said this many a time, but in the entire history of drinking whiskey, nobody has ever knows what's coming, knows the glass of whiskey, and said that smells very efficient. That smells like a really high yielding grain. That's really cheap to produce. Absolutely. So nobody's thinking about that when you're drinking whiskey, so we don't think about it when we're making it. It's really important to think about the quality of spirit and the flavour. The flavour's coming from the grain, and it's coming from the soil. And when you think about the process of making whiskey, when you're mashing and then fermenting, the yeast is metabolizing all of those nutrients and flavours the grain has taken up from the soil. So they are then creating the flavours which we then, by distilling, we magnify, we zero in on. So distillation is a great way of actually focusing on the terroir, on the influence of the soil and the whole kind of package there. So this is one where we nose and taste. It feels different. There's more influence for me of the grain on this one. The texture. I mean, we make a great spirit, with everything we make. But with Octomore, with Isla grown barley, you find that viscosity is magnified. That texture comes through more. So for me, that's what this whiskey is all about. It's about the difference that the place brings to the whiskey.
I mean, Octomore Farm is just 2 miles down the road, so it's 2 miles. It's close to the distillery, and obviously right on the edge of Loch and Dol. So again, it's been affected by the winds that come off the Atlantic. So it's getting that kind of salty. Influence, definitely. But that's what I was just leading to, is that one thing with the point 3 I always find is that it's got a lovely texture, but you always find that kind of dryness in your lips, that saltiness, and you just if you keep licking your palate, you always get that kind of saltiness. Now there could be other factors, but I think it's one of the things I always kind of resemble is that's one of the main points of difference between the point 1 and point 2 and the point 3 is that you get that saltiness and it's amazing whiskey, and it's something again we're so proud of, is working with local farmers like James, so close to the distillery. See them growing barley for the distillery, and then for the farmers to have that connection with having produced something that they know that it's gone into a product. James knows that all his barley has gone into making this product. It's not anyone else's barley. It's coming from Octomore Farm. I
think it's an amazing thing actually. I mean, we give you the details. I mean, it's a high strength whiskey again, 61.6%. It's 189.5 ppm. So it's a really, on the face of it, really powerful whiskey. But as we've talked about many a time this evening, the gentleness and the softness in a 5-year-old whiskey that has those incredible numbers is something that I always think is just incredible to actually experience and taste.
Even without water, I'm bad for. I teach people all the time to nose it without and to taste it without, and then add a little water, and then nose it and taste it, and then add some more and add some more, and you'll get to the point where you've added too much, but then you'll find your key point. And then I go home and I drink whiskey and I never add water because it's what I do. Yeah. But when you go straight in with that, you're never ever saying that 61.6%. No. It's not about the people who are drinking whiskey at 43 to 46 to 50% are going to think 61. That's going to be the first thing you notice. But again, talking about balance, talking about all the elements that play a part in this, that you're not just, it's not about the ABV, which it probably in a way sort of should be.
Yeah, that's absolutely. Right. But again, it's that kind of challenge, isn't it? You always think again it shouldn't work. But it does when you taste it. Because again, you can look at every bottle on the shelf, you can look at all of these different numbers and things that surround, and I'll probably get the numbers wrong, but you can look at all of these things that you define a whiskey by. But seeing as soon as you pop the cork and you taste it, that's when you experience it. Yeah. And I think again, Octomore is a great experience. This Isla Barley is an amazing whiskey. I always think again like the knowledge we give around the whiskey. So this is a single field, single farm. We know the farmer, the name of the farmer. So there's not many times you could be sitting there having a dram and knowing exactly where it came from, having all that traceability, knowing all those details, knowing the name of the farmer. For me, that's a really special thing, and it won't make the whiskey taste different, but it makes your enjoyment or your appreciation of that whiskey much more. So that's why for me it's such an important thing to talk about those details.
I think for me again it's probably there's a bit about the appreciation as well. I think that plays a big part for me because it's, whether it's with Bruichladdich Isla Barley or Port Charlotte Isla Barley or the 0.3s, you look at this summer, it's been a tough summer, right? Yeah. It's been a tough summer in farming, whether you're farming barley or you're down south, they've got their own challenges and farms down there growing whatever grains they are. And on Isla, it's been pretty wet.
This year's been really, really tough. It's been one of the hardest years that we've had over 20 odd years to grow barley. I mean, I think overall we're like 30% down than we were last year. So it's been tough.
And as you say, when you nose and taste that whiskey in 5 years' time, or whatever it might be, you're not going to nose it and go, oh yeah, that was the year that they were 30% down, it was a tough summer. But getting to drive around this island and live here and go out with my kids to the beach and see the barley fields and see what's going on, you get that appreciation. When we're able to bring people to the island and take them around and show them what goes into this product, and you spend time, whether it's with James at Octomore or it's with Andrew at Cool or it's with Alistair at Caribous or whoever, they're all standing in the field with their own challenges, but they're also proud to have this, as you say, this quality product at the end of it, and it's sort of having the opportunity to see it and experience it and smell it and be there and hear the struggle makes you appreciate the liquid that comes at the end.
We always talk about whiskey bringing people together, and whether it's like this, the three of us are sitting here having a dram, or and there's 3 people at home watching, but
my wife, your wife.
What time are they done? But it does. Whiskey brings people. There's whiskey clubs. There's even some of the messages are coming through whiskey clubs talking about these whiskies, and it brings people together. That connection is really great. Totally, but I think the great thing about what we do on Bruichladdich is that connection to the community, and it's the connection to the growers. And the whiskey is not just from a grain that we buy from we don't even know. It is connecting the land and no.
I'll tell you a short story. But it was not like Duncan and knew James Brown very well. They grew up together, and Duncan McGilvery. Duncan McGilvery was the distillery manager. So I learned under Duncan. And so Duncan, when James started growing barley for us, it was Duncan was the go-to person. Then I started working under Duncan and getting to know. And I think Duncan was maybe on holiday or something. It was just after the harvest, and I knew James, but I didn't know him that well. First time, he came up after the barley harvest to sort out his invoice, and he came into came into the office, and I was chatting away. I said, "Do you want a tea or coffee? You want a dram?" He said, "Oh, of course I'll have a dram." So I thought, okay. So I went and got a bottle of Octomore, opened it, brand new seal, just opened it, put it out, got a couple of glasses, poured the glasses, put the cork back in the bottle, and said to James, "Here he goes, cheers, slange." And he was like, he put the glass down, took the cork out, and threw it in the bin. And he said, "We won't be needing that." And I was like, "Oh, right, okay, this is the way this meeting's going to go." So needless to say, we got a good discount in the barley that year because,
it's either going one way or the other.
But just that was, I wasn't expecting it. He just took the cork out and threw it away and just said, we won't be needing that.
I don't know how long we've been on air, but we've probably got another 8 or 9 hours of telling stories about James
I
Brown.
literally just went, in my head, as you were finishing that story, I went, oh, I've got a belter of a story that follows on from that. And I went to start saying it, and I was like, nah, because if I do that, you'll do it, and then in 2 hours' time, we'll be still telling James Brown stories. But I mean, that's
the cameras are off, Robbie's gone home.
Exactly, that's a standard for James, isn't it? But yeah, so Adam, very briefly, the cast makeup for the .3, it's interesting again, some wine influence. Give us a wee bit of a...
So, yeah, with this one, I think again, because basically it's 1 week's distillation, so it's probably filling about 200 casks.
Yeah.
It's really, not even that, probably about 150. So it's quite a small kind of batch you're making. And with that, we know we want to fill some bourbon barrels, so that'll be kind of the heart of what we're doing there. But we also filled some sherry casks, some PX sherry casks, and some Sauterne casks. And again, what we found again with Sauterne, you mentioned them as well, it works really well, that sweetness, the fruit, that kind of overripe fruit you get, and the smoke works really nicely. So we find that's a bit of a winner, and particularly when you've got that really kind of grain, kind of forward character of the Isle of Barley, it always seems to work really nicely. So again, we're always going to try different things, and for me, it comes back to the very first time that we distilled with James's barley. You know, I think the 6.3 was the first time we released the 0.3. I remember going with Jim to go and look at the cast and see what we would do, and kind of we looked on the stock sheet to see what was filled, and 50% of it, and we're probably talking about 80 casks. It was very, very small. So it was like 40 casks that were first fill bourbon, and 40 casks that were first fill Syrah. Is that half and half?
That's right. Well done, yeah.
Thank God for that's not probably judgment.
Your wife's a teacher as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is she maths teacher, no?
No, but she does work overtime when she comes home. But so roughly half and half. And that's all we had. So it was that kind of thing where we've just distilled this for the first time, and Jim's decided that we're going to mature half of it in first fill. So that's a really powerful red wine, big influence, bright pink colour, and it was just that kind of boldness, I think, that was quite cool. So that's what we had. We mixed it together and went, that works absolutely incredibly. Got the ratios right, and into a bottle. And it's that kind of thing with it that we always try and have a little bit of interesting cask maturation in there, and there's only so much of it. We don't make much. It's quite precious spirit, but there's still that. Do you know what? We can try something. We'll try something new. I think that's a bit of boldness. I think we need.
Yeah, and I think Octomore's built in boldness, isn't it? So, cool. So Octomore, Octomore .3 again. A lot of people ask us questions about the numbering system. The .3 is always going to be Isle of Barley. That is the key. That is the key part of it. It's always going to be Isle of Barley. But as you've said, both you guys have said, most importantly, it's going to be Octomore of Octomore. So it's single field, single farm, 100% barley grown at Octomore farm, and then the guardrails are down after that, and you've got a bit of play time with the casks and that. So I've left a little bit more of that in my glass for this one, because I think so far, and I shouldn't have favourites to say my kids. I've got 4 kids, 4 bottles, but I think this year the .3 has certainly been the one that stood out to me. Like it changes every year. I don't know. Everyone says, do you prefer the .1 or the .2? And I'm like, well, it just, they're so different all the time. But this year, I think that, obviously they're all great, and of course they always are. But there's just something about the .3 again for me this year that's just.
But it's a night like tonight when the wind's blowing,
100%.
and it's like really wet outside. You're inside, you're cosy, having a dram of Octomore like a .3. That's just perfect.
If you could sort the capex budget and the project for us to get a fireplace right in the middle of the setup here, that could be. Sitting by here, fire, that'd be the...
You do know that the chimney's going straight through Alan's office.
Exactly, yeah.
It's fine, I'll get heat off in the way out.
Especially in the winter when the stalls are off. We'll go on to the .4 shortly, I know, but I think it's an interesting point you touched on there about occasion, and I think again in Islay that's a big thing for a whisky. And I was in the US last week launching another product that's coming soon with the team out there, and genuinely, I think every second question I was asked was, what's your favourite Bruichladdich or Bruichladdich, Port Charlotte, Octomore? And my answer is always the same. It just depends. It depends whether I'm at a wedding or a funeral or it's a birth or it's, you know, where there's rubbish outside or it's sunny or I'm at a barbecue. Or whiskey's such an occasional whiskey. It's such an occasional product, and it's so diverse that there is one for every occasion. Luckily for us. But as you say quite rightly, Alan, a high strength, 189.5 ppm whiskey, howling wind outside. If that's not warming you up, then then the money to get the fire in and get it up through the ceiling there. So yeah, that's the 0.3. The 0.4 just recently released in the last few weeks online. Funnily enough, actually, Katie and I were going through the questions earlier, and we've had a lot of questions about the 0.4 in terms of, you know, sometimes it's a 10-year-old, sometimes it's a 0.4, and how that kind of decision-making process. Why is it sometimes it's a 0.4 and sometimes it's a 10-year-old? While I go in for my first few swigs off it, well, you can maybe tell us a wee bit about that.
Yeah, so I think again, Octomore is quite difficult to grade.
Oh, sorry. What was it you said earlier on? Consistency is the lack of
well, that's it, exactly that. And again, when it comes to me and the numbering, like, obviously I'm all over the place, so that reflects quite nicely in the way we release these things. But no, I think again, Octomore is limited in what we make. It's difficult for the maltsters to produce that high level of phenols. Again, we're not trying to make this for the world. It's really quite small batch, so we don't always have availability to do a 10-year-old, or we don't always have availability to do a 0.4. So having them kind of in and out is quite nice, because again, it's not about a formula and consistency. It's just about which whiskey is ready at the time. So that's why we kind of release them. And also there's things like, again, we talked about the OBA, the polyphonic, various different things. We might do a single cask here and there. There's little things that kind of live outside that kind of framework as well. But the idea with the virgin oak kind of maturation, that kind of in whiskey, often people talk about virgin oak being too powerful. Typically in the whiskey industry, we're using casks that have been ex-bourbon barrels, ex-wine casks, ex-sherry casks. That wood has been used before, so some of the power of that intensity of the oak has been transferred into whatever spirit or wine has been used in that cask first. And then we mature whiskey in it, because the flavours, the delicacy of the spirit that we're distilling, you don't want too much influence. But I think particularly obviously with Jim and that kind of boldness, that trying things just to see what would happen, using virgin oak was quite interesting, because I think it's about how you pay attention to the spirit. It's about how you then think about, without the influence of any other flavours, it's just the oak. How does that shape the spirit? And how do you toast the cask, char the cask? How do you watch the maturation? So if you think it's getting too much influence, going back to the 10.4, I remember tasting that about 2.5 years old, thinking we need to get this in the bottle now, because it's 2.5 years old.
So strong.
But the way those casks were toasted was to release so much flavour. So all we've been doing with that virgin oak is working with the cooperages to think about the toast levels, the flavours, the species of the oak, all of these different factors. So it's really getting into the details. But the 0.4 is really interesting because, it's the power and that intensity of the smoke, and the power and the intensity of the wood, and how they work together, and how you, again, on the face of it shouldn't work. On the face of it's too powerful. But actually, let's get into it. Let's see what we can do, and let's use our whiskey knowledge to make something that works. And again, you mentioned, Alan, earlier the idea that the smoke is quite kind of bonfire, dry peat smoke, and what you get is this lovely. I mean, you probably, as you know, this. You get this lovely kind of barbecue kind of style of the smoke, and that sweetness of the oak really comes through. So. For this, this is quite interesting as well, because obviously with the Islay grown barley for the 0.3, we usually keep it for the 0.3. But again, in that spirit of breaking the mold and trying new things, we actually used some of this exact same spirit, but aged in virgin oak casks. So it's the Islay Octomore aged in virgin oak, which again just adds another dimension to what it is we've able to do.
And again, as I said earlier, I'm never tasting that and saying that's the same liquid as the 0.3.
Absolutely.
And it's just down to the cask.
It's down to the cask.
Two amazing experiments side by side, really, two pairs. And again, I first tasted these whiskies at the point of sampling before they went to bottling. I didn't really know the makeup, and I didn't have that information. And again, in my mind, it would just be, this is another virgin oak, and you're exploring it, and yeah, all the flavour profiles there, all that strength. But you would never have said that again the two were coming from the same world. And 189.5 ppm again for this one. Again, that's not overpowering. It's not about the strength or the peat.
Yeah,
You know,
you've got balance.
it's a funny thing. We talk about the ppm, and again, one of the reasons probably I'm struggling to remember all the ppms and strengths on the 16s is because we're working on the 17s, the 18s, and the 19s at the moment. So you've got all of these different ppms kind of floating around your head. But it's I kind of forgot where I was going with that.
It's
with
funny,
that story, but
to be fair, it is funny you should mention that, because Peter Hosek in Vienna in Austria, he's asked the question, every year you issue 4 or even more sometimes, which is right, different Octomore expressions. He says, I assume you try to be different every year. Where do you go for ideas what to do next? And how far are the future Octomore bottlings fixed? So for example, is the 17 lineup decided already? So nice segue, I know you meant that. But you're working that far in advance, where you're thinking about flavour profiles. Where's this going to be for the 17s? Where's this going to be for the 18s? And where's this going to be for the 19s?
Absolutely. Even the Octomore that we distill this year, we'll know what the ppm and all that kind of stuff is, very, very early. So as that whiskey is a few months old, we'll have the analysis. We'll know what we've got there. But so that's kind of where I was going with that, with all these different kind of ppms that quite often when we're thinking about those future additions, we will see the ppm drop a little bit. We talk about 189.5 here. We talked about 307, 308, 309. It's massive levels of peat, and then we're going to see over the next few editions the peat level drop a little bit, and there's the temptation to think, oh God, that's not very peaty. What's happened? We've gone back down to 80 ppm, but 80 ppm is still the world's most heavily peated whiskey. It's still incredibly peated. But I think again, what I certainly think with the Octomore of when you think about going back to the very early editions and the power of the smoke and how we work with it, as we become more familiar with it, as we understand it better, you realise that doesn't really define the whiskey at all. The smoke it's really interesting to see how it comes through. It always for me it's on the finish. It's how long you get that flavour for, and it's about the balance of the spirit, and actually with less smoke, less phenol coming through in the distillation, you highlight other elements of that whiskey, and I think again that's really key to what Octomore 100%. Is, and so those kind of lower phenol levels will allow us to explore things in a different way, which again I think is a really interesting element of what Octomore is.
What I find quite interesting with the 0.4, every release of 0.4 we've done that's been in virgin oak, and obviously tasting many in the warehouses, is that the one thing that stands out for me is the long finish. We talked earlier on about the viscosity and the finish, but like with the virgin oak, it just that layers and layers of flavour. After sipping that, 30 minutes, an hour later, you'll still be, tasting Octomore. And I've often met people that have come to, different events that we've been doing, and they want to try Octomore, and you're saying just maybe try some Bruichladdich or Port Charlotte first, because when you try drinking Octomore, then your palate's going to be really saturated in that flavour that you might not appreciate in the other whiskies after that. And some people just get carried away in excitement and they want to try it, but you speak to them maybe an hour later and they're talking to you and it's like fire coming out of their breath. It's just that smell of Octomore.
It's right with the virgin oak as well, because I think you can start when you have a lineup like this, and we're obviously very lucky to have it, and I know everyone at home doesn't, and I hope some of you do, but you can start with the 0.1 and then you can move to the 0.2, and then you can move to the 0.3, and then you can move to the 0.4. You couldn't start at the 0.4 and then go to the 0.1,
absolutely,
because that finish is going to live with you for so long. I totally get that, 100%.
You've got to build your way up, and if you're drinking other whiskies, whether it be Bruichladdich or anything else that's unpeated, drink them first before you drink Octomore, because that's...
So we've absolutely bluttered the time. I was never given a time. We've wrecked it, and it's Katie said you'll do this in an hour, and we were told an hour and a half maybe, but we're almost there. But we've got a few more bits to cover. loads of you have obviously sent in questions. Thank you so much for the engagement. It's great, and it really. I hope in the conversation we've covered some of the things that we've not been able to answer directly, but we can't thank you enough for taking the time to send in the questions. Those of you who have, I think a really lovely way to finish, and just to touch on a kind of last wee bit. A question from, and I will butcher this name, just so you know. Jürgen Scheiman asks, what inspires, and it's maybe a good one for you to answer, Alan, and for Adam maybe to finish up on, but what inspires you and the team to kind of keep reinventing Octomore, and what can fans, like the people that are watching tonight, look forward to in the future of the range?
Well, so I think what inspired, I think the fact that, Octomore is such a unique whisky to begin with, and we know that we created something special in 2002, and how it's evolved due to all the creativity that we've had over the last 20 odd years. That I think that's what drives us, because we're always curious, and we're allowed to be curious. Nobody's telling us you must do this. So I think that drives us every day to keep pushing the boundaries. Keep asking ourselves, what if? What if we do this? What if we do that? And exploring. But the great thing about Octomore is that I think when people have gone on that discovery and have experienced the discovery of Octomore, they become followers of something that's very unique, and it's almost like an underground, like, have you heard about Octomore, have you tasted this, and people talk about it and they know it's something special, they tell their friends, they introduce it to their friends. So the fact that people are recognising it like that drives us as well. Like, it's not, it's something that is very special, and I've met many people who just have had Octomore, but they've said, like, I didn't think I liked peated whiskey, or I didn't even like whiskey, and now I'm drinking Octomore, and it's been a gateway in, which you would think is totally bizarre given the profile of it. So I think it's just something, because it's so unique, that it drives us to keep making it. And we know we've been given something special by Jim and Duncan and everybody, that they created that. But it's their legacy, and we want to continue and pass it on to the next generation. That's our whole ethos here. We'll be the custodians for so long, but we want to pass it on to the next generation in better hands or better position than we found it. So laying down stocks every year is very important.
Yeah, definitely.
And the future, Adam, what's the? You don't have to give us the. I seen a wee thing. Popped up my computer today. I saw a wee future thing, but I can't really talk much about it. But there is. I know next year's our 25th anniversary of the reopening of the distillery. It's going to be super important. There's some amazing stuff that I know that you and the team and the marketing guys are working on in the background that I think is going to blow people's socks off. But any wee hints at anything in the future, Octomore, that you can see?
Well, yeah, I think I can maybe just kind of think of what Alan was saying. I think there's an incredible pride in what we do.
Yeah.
Like, Octomore is a really special thing to be able to do, and it takes a lot of work. I mean, almost making the whiskey is the easy bit, but every year developing these products, and it takes so much time, which is why we're working all the time. So the reason most people don't do what we do is because there's so much effort to release these 4 whiskies every time, but I think we are just so proud of, again, the legacy that we've been given and we've inherited, that we're able to work on. It's something really, really special, and you could take it for granted, because what we do is our livelihood. But I think, again, you'd still know when you taste those spirits, and you picking up these really lovely, delicate flavours coming through in the whiskey, that you think this is something special. And in terms of the future, I think, again, we keep in that same kind of vein. We keep moving forward. We keep trying new things, and as you alluded to, we always have something up our sleeve. There's always a little something special. And thinking back, we've been talking some of the things we never talked about, any of the quadruple distilled Octomore, and some of these things we've done in the past. We've got Octomore that is aging. Of course, we have to just wait. That's time it takes for that to age. So, we tasted 5-year-old, maybe 10-year-old, 15-year-old with a polyphonic. What would a 20-year-old Octomore taste like? If we're patient enough, then there'll be something there to. If we keep you away out of Warehouse 11, we'll be all right.
Patience, I do know that.
So I think it's, again, like Alan says, it's keeping that legacy alive. It's keeping that that interest in the spirit, which it's the way we know how to make whiskey, I think. So
Well, that's
always something new.
That's a very lovely thing, I think, to end on. I think from myself, I know you two guys are, you know, you're running a production side, and I know you've got a big team around you, but I know how busy you are and how your schedules are, and to take the time for an hour and a half to sit and talk to us, especially when the weather's rubbish and we've got guys running the wheels outside to keep the power going. It's great to get time with you. I hope we do this again, because it's great to take some time to talk about stuff that's new and talk to the people out there that matter so much to us. So,
absolutely.
So yeah,
We
so
should
thanks.
record this next time. We should,
Just do and then we can nail it, get all the numbers perfect. But no, thank you very much to the team behind. Thank you, most importantly, to everyone again who's watching at home. All three of you, Erin, my wife, Amy, and Jacqueline at home. Thank you very much, and we'll speak to you soon. All these products are available across the world. You'll come across them. The Point 4 is available online, exclusive. But I do hope those of you who don't have it tonight are able to get your hands on some soon. And thank you very much for joining.
Slàinte.
Cheers. Thanks everyone.
Cheers.